I mean, people come to this sport from all different avenues. I was a late bloomer. I was not very athletic in high school or college, and I got into running in my mid 20s in graduate school. But I took my time. I did road running and I did 5Ks and 10Ks and marathons, and I switched over to trail and graduated to ultra in the early to mid 2000s. But it took me 20 years from getting into running in 1994 to 2014 to do my first 100 miler.
This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpre. If you're active at all, whether you're running or simply out walking for the day, you've probably experienced one of the number one problems that active people have, and that's chafing. Solpre's all-new, all-natural anti-chafe balm solves that problem while feeding your skin the vital nutrients it needs to be healthy. If you'd like to stop chafing once and for all and treat your body right, go to solpre.com to check out the anti-chafe balm today. That's SOLPRI.com. Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today is a woman after my own heart. She is the author of the Trail Runner's Companion. If you're on the video version, you can see the book. So you're going to want to check that out. And we're going to get deep into trail running, I'm sure. She's an ultra runner herself, a professional ultra running coach. And if you don't do ultras, I'm sure she can help you with that as well. But that is not where she stops. She does other things like freelance writing. She's dedicated to nonprofit board service, currently leading in a local nonprofit. She's a mother of two, an avid horsewoman. Welcome to the show, Sarah Lavender Smith.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. Before we get going, and so I don't get it incorrect, because I think I remember, but you said before we got going, you think it's important because you had previously been a co-host of a podcast that we mention your age. So I'll let you tell us what it is and why you think that's important.
Well, I'm actually, my training is as a journalist. I went to graduate school in journalism and used to work as a newspaper reporter. So we were always taught you should include a person's age because it just tells you something about the person. But I'm on the older side. I'm 52 now, and I think it's important that people hear from older athletes, and I really stress longevity in the sport. So yeah, I'm an empty nester who's raised two kids, and now I'm over 50. 52, and I'm proud of it.
It seems like that's the thing we were talking about before we were recording. I see people try to get real ambitious about marathons in particular, though you probably see some people do this in the ultra world as well, like really try to just zoom into let's do 50 milers and let's like just crank it out and start doing these high mileage as fast as we can. And I feel like I don't know whether you watch South Park, but there's this episode where their kids are learning how to ski, and there's this instructor that is trying to teach them and keeps talking about, if you do this, you're going to have a bad time. And that's what comes into my head every time somebody's like, I basically don't run at all, and I want to go run this very long distance race. I'm like, if you do that, you're going to have a bad time. Like, it's just, you're setting yourself up for injury, for setback, for just, and some people get away with it. And I think that's part of the trouble, I guess, is that some people can do it, but in general, I think it's ill-advised.
Yeah, some people do dive right into it. I mean, people come to this sport from all different avenues. I was a late bloomer. I was not very athletic in high school or college, and I got into running in my mid 20s in graduate school. But I took my time. I did road running and I did 5Ks and 10Ks and marathons, and I switched over to trail and graduated to ultra in the early to mid 2000s. But it took me 20 years from getting into running in 1994 to 2014 to do my first 100 miler. And now so many people are getting into trail and ultra. They want to, they go from running a half marathon on dirt to planning a 100 miler 4 months later. And it's doable, but I feel like, what's the rush? I mean, success at ultra running depends so much on experience and on
Hmm.
mental preparation. Like physical fitness alone won't get you through 100 miles. So taking your time with it and enjoying the journey and not being a rising star who flames out in 18 months, I think is a better way to go.
And so I don't currently exist in the trail community. That's not my current niche, though I'm starting to kind of look that direction. So we'll get more to that in a minute. But it, at least from reading the book and my general, I don't know, feeling about the community, that whole idea of like just being performance focused almost seems like antithesis to the ethos of trail running itself, right? Where it's like it seems, again, I'm kind of a little bit outside looking in, so please correct me. It seems it's a little bit more like enjoyment focused. It's like inwardly focused, self motivated, like that kind of thing versus like I'm absolutely the winner or whatever, like that kind of
Well, I
mentality.
don't know. Well, so it's interesting. So you're bringing up an interesting point. So historically, back in the days of the early 2000s, pre-social media,
Hmm.
this ultra running community was much smaller. There were many fewer ultras offered throughout the country and world, and it was more of a fringe thing. And I mean, when I got into it, it was easy to get to know who's who, but it's taken off. Much as marathons boomed in the 90s,
Hmm.
ultra running is going through a similar boom. And that has its pros and cons. I think more women are getting into the sport now, just as they got more into marathoning. Um, but the humility that used to rule the sport, I mean, when I got into ultras again before social media, and people would share their race reports via email saying, like, you don't have to read this if you don't want to, but this was my experience. Now, with Instagram and everything, everyone's all about trying to get sponsorships, and it's very show offy in my view. And they're big personalities in the sport. And I mean, this week we're recording this 2 days before both UTMB and Leadville 100 happen,
Hmm.
and those are very very performance oriented and
Yeah.
very high stakes. So it's not a little fringe sport in any way anymore. It's like, and also the way that corporate big names like Ironman and Spartan and everything are gobbling up the what used to be homegrown races,
Hmm.
it's fundamentally changing. I mean, it's still a very friendly sport, and absolutely it can and should be a personal journey, especially for mid packers. You don't have to be super competitive to get into it. You can find your space. And as a coach, I always encourage my clients to compete with their watch and with their inner self. Like, you are just out there to do your best. And my view on competition is you make friends mentally with the runners around you, and you're all in it together, and you help your competitors, your friends, carry you along, um, at least the first three quarters of the race, and then you can try to drop them. But yeah, I have always found a strong sense of community in this sport, which I really value, and I hope some of the humility still persists. I kind of question whether it will.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar conversation with a number of people. We talk about Iron Man definitely has become so much more than like a fringe sport that just a few weirdos are out doing. And I say that lovingly. I don't say that in a mean way. Um, and then I wish I could remember who it was. I feel like it was a gentleman on the podcast talking about off-road triathlon. Gosh, I can't remember his name right now. But talking about like a similar kind of like vibe to the races, that they're smaller, a little more community focused, all that kind of thing. And then it's like starting to grow and it comes a little bit more competitive and I'll say diluted in some sense, just because you get such a broader mixture of personalities, the more and more people that you have there. And I think I wonder, maybe it's simply a matter of like romanticizing the situation, but it's like I wonder, is it good to always grow a sport? Is it gatekeeping to not grow the sport? Like, the different
No,
things you have to
I think
weigh.
so. I think, well, one point I want to make is ultra races, especially on in mountainous terrain, they will always be smaller and friendlier because the size of races will always be smaller. I
Right.
mean, I just did a 100 miler 3 weeks ago that had its permit capped at 150 participants. So UTMB happening in Europe with several thousands of runners is still the exception rather than the
Hmm.
norm. I mean, most trail and ultra races are going to be smaller because the the physical terrain of the trail and the permitting process limits participants, and I think that's a good thing. It makes it harder to get into popular races, and that's why we've seen a growth of the lottery process to get into more popular races. But the market responds, and a lot of new races and new race directors have come up.
Hmm.
um, I definitely support the growth of the sport because it supports health and wellness. I mean,
Hmm.
what a wonderful thing for people to find a way beyond hiking, to get out in nature, and that appreciation of nature and being out in a more natural environment hopefully will inspire people to take care of that natural environment. So yeah, I mean, I think growth is a good thing, and we've seen a growth in races that are offered. I think it's a very healthy sport generally. So in general, I think it's a good thing for sure. I hope that it doesn't become so high profile and profit oriented that all the bad things start to creep in, such as, namely doping.
Right.
The other things that come with higher stakes sports.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit, talking about um, being out in nature, kind of being more mindful of wanting to care for the terrain and surroundings. Um, I remember before we got going, I said I had mentioned you in one of the running videos I did for the YouTube channel, and I couldn't at the time I couldn't think of what it was, but I just did a video on um, does running in nature make you happy? And so I want to touch on that with you and get your opinion on that. But it seems like that kind of like I'll call it like a mindfulness aspect of the sport kind of bridges all those things together where you're out in nature and experiencing it, but then also you affect it in part by being out there and then also just through your everyday, consumption or lack of consumption of products and choices in what you make, and if you work with nonprofits like you do, although I don't know what the nonprofits you work with do. um, but they all seems to kind of blend together, at least in my theoretical um, situation here. So I'd like your, I guess, opinion on, does running in nature make you happier versus all the road races, and does the mindfulness come naturally as a rhythm of being out for so long, or is it something you have to actually
Yeah.
work on?
I don't want to in any way discourage people from road running. I mean, running is running, and most trail runners do a mix of pavement and dirt. And it's interesting. So I relocated here to Southwest Colorado, and I'm in this blissful, beautiful mountain environment. And our house is at 9,000 feet, so I'm pretty altitude adapted. But before that, I spent the past 25 years in the East Bay area in a very urban environment. And I'm missing it. Like I used to at least once a week run around Oakland's Lake Merritt, which is,
Hmm.
a paved flat path. It's vibrant. I mean, you have city noises, you have more cultural and racial diversity there than I'll ever see here in Southwest Colorado.
Yeah.
You've got, you're dodging homeless people, and I love that. I'm feeling nostalgic for that. So you can run in a very urban environment and still be very happy and very mindful and take in all that's happening around you.
Hmm.
What I think is beneficial about running in a more natural environment rather than just sticking to roads. Well, one is I think it's healthier insofar as generally speaking, a natural trail environment is going to have a lot more variety
Hmm.
and challenge you in different ways because of the hill profile, unless you're in a very, unless you're in Kansas, you're going to have a hill profile that's very, very variable. You're going to have rocks and roots and different natural obstacles,
Hmm.
and your pace is going to vary. I mean, when I was a dedicated marathoner, road marathoner, and I was so precise about my pace work so that, I just knew intuitively without looking at my watch what a 7:30 mile felt like versus a 7:45 mile,
Hmm.
or you're very, very pace oriented. All that goes out the windows when you're in the mountains. I mean, I might get my pace under 9 minutes per mile when I'm running down a rocky slope, but on flats and uphills, I'm going to be downshifting to hiking. My pace will go as slow as 20 minutes a mile if it's a
Hmm.
lot of hiking up a scree field. So it creates more intuitive running and more adaptability and flexibility. And you just as you might have read in my book, one of my favorite pieces of advice is you just take what the trail gives you. And
Hmm.
that means you just run the best you can, or hike if you have to hike, with whatever stretch of trail happens to be in front of you, whether it's sand or rock or mud or whatever, or snow. You get it all. And so that kind of variety makes me very happy. And yes, then being out in nature, just the peacefulness. I mean, I only use my phone for safety, and I do listen to some audiobooks or podcasts while I'm run, but mostly like I'm very unplugged and
Hmm.
focused on my surroundings. So, and I do my best thinking. I mean, I come back home and I feel so much more productive because I've worked out things mentally during my run.
Hmm. I do that as well, and so I backed off a little bit in telling people not to like take music out and whatever. Just but I was a big advocate for a long time, like don't take your music, just because I think there's so much benefit from not having the extra layer of like input into your brain when you're out and doing things and able to spend time with yourself. Um, but back up a little bit. You talking about take the trail as it is. I don't think that's the exact quote you said.
Take what the trail gives
Take
you.
what the trail gives you. Well, so recently it just worked out well. I didn't plan it this way. Just had my first cross country race back this last weekend, and I remember how much I miss it. But so I thought about that as I was reading through the book again, and then when I got to that section, it reminded me a couple of years ago I flew out to Colorado Springs to do the incline, and it just happened to be that like weather had been great, and then the day before I got out there is snow. So then it was 30 degrees, it's snowy, so it's like okay, I had been training and I wanted to see, well, how fast could I do it?
And sorry to
Clearly,
interrupt, but you should explain what you're talking about too.
oh, so
What the Manitou incline is for people who don't
okay,
know.
okay. So for the listener, so the Manitou Incline is an old, I'll call it like a cart line that was for mining, I believe. Now it's been decommissioned. It is a trail that is just shy of a mile. I think it's around 0.9, 0.93, something like that. And it climbs 2,000 feet in that time. So the average gradient is
It's
40%.
steps.
And yeah, and there's railroad ties, there's at certain sections, there's grates to allow water to pass underneath so it doesn't wash out the trail, that kind of stuff. And so at the time, I was like, well, Joseph Gray has the verifiable fastest known times, like high 17s or something like that. I'm like, I'm definitely not going to be that fast, but like, could I do mid 20s? Could I do, any faster than that? So it's a little tough in that I live in a low altitude environment. I don't have hills like that to train on, but we did our best to train for it. I think I ended up like 30 or something like that with the snow. And with the saying, it reminded me of not so much the ascent as the descent down the backside of the trail to get back. because it was like, at least that day, patches of slushy snow. It's trying to melt. There's rocks and tons of switchbacks, and just not something that I go with in my everyday life. But I had my spikes with me, which are the best because I don't have trail shoes, and just used those and got down as best I could. It was not fast coming down, but that's exactly what I thought of. It was just like I'd already done the hard work getting up as best I could, and then it was simply a matter of descend however you're able to without trying to like twist an ankle going fast for no reason. In anyway, so yeah, once I hit that part of the book, I can't remember what chapter that was. That's what that reminded me of. So I wanted to share that anecdote with you, I guess.
Thanks. Well, I've only done the Manitou Incline once. It was when I was with Jason Coop's ultra running camp, and we did that crazy incline in the middle of a long run on a hot day. So we ran like 8 miles through the mountains to get to the base of it. We went up it, and then we did another. I mean, our total that day was 22 or something. So that
Mm-hmm.
was it was tough. Actually, and I remember it was Memorial Weekend, and I was so inspired by all the average looking
Mm-hmm.
people with their and families with their kids out there. Like they did not look athletic, and they were carrying gallon water jugs, but they were determined to get to the top. And
Yeah.
it was really neat to witness.
Yeah, we have my wife has a couple sisters that live in Colorado Springs. One of them does the incline semi regularly. And yeah, it's just as far as I understand, and actually my college coach is from Manitou. His parents live on the street where the incline is, which is how I learned about it and ended up going out there. Um, it's like a ritual for a lot of the people that live around there. Like I do it once a week, or I do it, some of them, once a day. It's just this thing that people go out and do like any other trail, except it's this extreme ascent, and then you get this beautiful view at the top. I hope you guys stopped at the top and had a chance to like
Yeah.
look out, and it wasn't just a let's continue on.
No, we did.
Yeah, that's good. So uh, you obviously made the transition from road to trail. uh, as I was getting prepared to talk to you, for some reason Google started giving me all these articles on like trail running. So I saw um, the national championship for like the 10K kind of distance was this last weekend. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should start doing that. So how do you make the transition, or is there a transition from road to trail? And then like in my particular case, or for people that don't live at altitude and are going to be going to races that are typically going to have some altitude to them, how do you deal with that situation?
Okay, well, let me take your first question
Sure.
first. Um, if simply just go run a trail, and if it's only 5 miles or so or under an hour, you don't need really any special preparation. You don't need trail shoes. Just go out and enjoy it. But generally speaking, I mean, my advice for anyone who's less familiar with trail running and only has been doing road is to take more of everything. You need more time because it's going to be slower. You need more fluids or calories. You need more patience. And so it's really a mental and logistical adjustment to make peace with being slower, because the variability of the terrain and the hills will slow you down. Um, I can tell you a funny story about one of my first memorable runs. I was 3 months postpartum with my first baby.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband and I, it was our anniversary. This was 1998. So I had been running for a few years, but I had been pregnant and had my first baby when I was 29. And my husband and I had our anniversary. I'm like, we're gonna leave our baby with with the babysitter for the first time ever. We're gonna go do this trail I'd always wanted to run, and it was the French Trail in Redwood Park of Oakland. and this is just a classic, beautiful redwood trail I had heard so much about. And I was so nervous about leaving our baby for the first time, but we were leaving her with really good friends of ours who also had a baby. And I left a bottle of breast milk. So I'm like, okay, we're good for
Hmm.
about, we've got like an hour and a half. And I'd estimated the time it would take us with the mileage based on my knowledge of road running. And I felt like the worst mother. We get out, this trail is so crazy slow and so challenging, and I immediately lose cell service. I mean, this is back in the mid 90s when cell service wasn't great.
Right.
So I'm just like crying I'm like, I am the worst mother ever. And we were like an hour late picking up our new baby. And I was just like, that was my introduction to my first real memorable trail run. So don't do that. But when you're transitioning to trail running, I mean, I wrote a whole book about it. So my book goes into a lot of the mental and logistical
Hmm.
preparation you need to be safe and to enjoy it. Um, one of the guys I quote early in the book, who's a top runner, and both road and trail runner, basically just says, a lot of it's about just chilling out and
Hmm.
and relaxing into the run, and also taking care of yourself along the way. So to give another example, just like to understand the difference in time and the endurance needs. My first trail marathon was a real eye opener because when I was at my peak in my 30s, I was getting my road marathon times down to the mid to low 3 hours. So I was
Hmm.
doing fairly well with road marathoning, and I entered a trail marathon in the San Francisco suburbs on a mountain called Mount Diablo, which is goes from about 500 feet up to 3,500 feet. So it's a 3,000-foot climb, and we looped around and did two summits. So I had no idea what I was in for, and I didn't carry enough water. I only had one little goo gel, and I didn't realize how much hiking would be involved. And it was this transformative, exciting adventure. But the upshot was my time for that marathon, it's in the book. I think it was like 5:20 something.
Yeah,
And I
I
almost
think you say
won.
like
I showed the
you were
difference
like
in
the first.
elevation.
You were the first
I
up, right?
I ended up being second female. I got passed toward
Right,
the
but
end, but
at the first summit, you were the first up or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at the elevation profile change between like the little Boston Marathon and then this double summit of this
Right.
mountain. So, but the point is it took me well over 5 hours to go 26 miles, which was unthinkably slow to me, but I actually
Yeah.
did really well. And so that just gives you an idea. If you're a 3.5 hour road marathoner, then a tough trail marathon may take you 5 to 6 hours. And so
Hmm.
you just have to build up to that greater endurance of time on your feet and take care of your systems along the way. Like, hydration and fueling becomes so much more important to manage, as well as body temperature,
Hmm.
thermoregulation, whether, to avoid getting too hot or in the mountains too cold. That's really essential for staying out there safely and getting to the finish. And it becomes even, once you get to 50Ks to 100 milers, then I just did a race that took me over 33 hours with
Yeah.
no sleep. So actually, it's not true. I took my first trail side nap. I passed out for 10 minutes in the middle of the night. So yeah, things get more interesting the longer you're out there for sure.
Or that's something I wondered about because I think um, I don't think I'm mixing this up, but I think you'd said from the race you just did, the winning woman was like 24, 25 hours, something like
25 hours. Yeah.
25. And so I'm just like, it seems like there's probably no sleeping in that time.
Yeah.
But then if you're taking a nap, like are you setting an alarm or are you just
No,
hoping you
no,
wake
no.
up?
So, and then I should still answer your question about altitude adaptation. But
Okay.
so the race I did for our listeners, this was July 30th and 31st in central Colorado, called the High Lonesome 100. And it's quite tough. It's not the toughest, but it is tough enough to be a hard rock qualifier, which means it's a qualifying race to apply to be in the Hard Rock 100, which is a big deal in Colorado. Um, it had about 23,500 feet of elevation gain. It got up to 13,000 feet. A lot of the race was above 12,000 feet. It was it was a tough race for sure. So no, normally you should not take naps. I've done a lot of 100 milers, and you get incredibly sleepy in the middle of the night, especially if it's at high altitude because you're
Hmm.
oxygen deprived, or if it's in really cold temperatures. But you just power through the night and don't sleep. But this was the first time I was I was maybe around 4 a.m. and it was very cold, and I couldn't keep my eyes open. Maybe it has to do with age. I don't know. But at this point in the race, I had what's called a pacer, which is someone who accompanies you, and it was my good friend. And I knew enough because I'm a napper. Like if I'm tired when I'm driving, I can pull over at the side of the road and close my eyes for 10 minutes, and it's so effective. And then I wake up. So I told my pacer, I said, Claire, I'm just going to lie down. I said, I don't want to wait till the aid station to try a nap because the lights and noise will wake me up. So I took out my emergency bivy that we have to carry, which is like a space blanket. And I used my down puffy, which we also had to carry because it was so cold out. I used it as a pillow. I closed my eyes and I passed out for 10 minutes. It was magic. And then I'm like, okay, let's go. So it was a calculated strategic decision. Like it's
Hmm.
worth it to pass out for 10 minutes in a mini nap because I knew I would feel better. So, and again, this comes with experience. Like this understanding this take doing well at ultras, it's you have to know your body and have been in these kind of mountainous environments before, so that
Hmm.
worked for me. But yeah, generally, unless you're graduating to the crazy 200 milers, you don't sleep midway. But you asked about altitude
I
adaptation, so
did.
you
Yeah.
want to know. Okay, so I have clients back in California at sea level who
Hmm.
train for some tough Colorado races. And the best, like, I don't advocate getting a hypoxic tent over your bed or anything
Hmm.
like that. Like that's expensive and more trouble than it's worth. What I do, basically, what you need to do is be as cardiovascularly fit as possible. Because what you have to understand is when you're in the mountains, you're asking your working muscles to make do with less oxygen flowing to
Hmm.
them. So you basically have to adapt your body to be as fit as possible so it can handle getting less oxygen. So one way to do that is just, do more speed work, do more high intensity hill work, anything that raises your breathing up to the point of being an intense effort. That, boost your cardiovascular fitness. So that means even though on the day of your ultra marathon, you're going to be going a slow and steady tortoise pace, you still want to have done that speed work in your training cycle so that your heart and lungs are ready to work hard in the thin air. And then I'm a believer in heat training because if you think about running in really hot temperatures, it's similar to altitude insofar as your working muscles are getting less oxygen because some
Hmm.
of the blood carrying oxygen is being diverted to the surface of your skin to perspire and cool your body off.
Hmm.
So your body is more stressed and your blood flow is working harder to cool your body off in heat. And therefore it is again adapting to that stress of running with less oxygen flowing to your working muscles. So my clients in California did a lot of heat training this summer before running in the tougher mountains. And then you just try to, you know, make the most of what you have around you. If you have any mountain environments, or if you can take a long day trip to, I have a client in Missouri who's training for um, a mountainous race, and she
Hmm.
just budgets 3-day weekends to come to Colorado to train, which is expensive and time consuming, but
Right.
it helps. So those are my that's my advice. But yeah, it's tough. You can't just come to the high altitude a week before the race and hope to get adaptation. It really takes months. And so um I'm grateful I sleep at 9,000 feet and do my runs at tree line a lot.
Yeah.
But it never gets easy. Like, even though I live here and I run up to 11,500 feet, which is tree line a lot, anything over 12,000 is like that will never be easy.
Hmm.
It's still really tough.
I I don't think I'm misremembering this, but you talked about heat adaptation. I think it was when I was talking to Scott Johnston, who's the author of the Uphill Athlete Training. It's like Uphill Athlete Training for
Mhm.
the Uphill Athlete, co-author. I talked to him back on episode 60, which if you're watching the video, that's what I was trying to figure out was what episode that was. Um, and so I think he talked about just you get more benefit conditioning wise, not just like heat conditioning, being able to deal with the heat, but overall fitness improves. So like if even if you go back to say a comfortable temperature like 60s and 70s, that heat acclimation, I can't remember why, but it seems like it has some kind of efficacy in making you perform better at like optimal temperatures as well. So like I always think about that
Yeah,
in
I mean, because
how to.
it's a couple things have happened. You've become more fit
Mhm.
cardiovascularly, but you've also become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean,
Right.
when I've done several desert races in triple digit heat, and you want to have some hot runs leading up to that
Mhm.
just so you get used to it. I mean, you just have to, again, get comfortable with being uncomfortable and relax and do it, and remind yourself like you have to slow your pace and manage your fluids and your thermoregulation a
Mhm.
lot more carefully. So you need that training before I last was in a hot running environment back in May when I
Mhm.
went down to Arizona, and I paced and crewed a friend for part of the crazy Cocodona 250, which was an inaugural endurance event, um, point to point in Arizona that went from, I believe, Black Canyon, Arizona, north to Flagstaff. And the afternoons of, I mean, this is a race that took people like 5 days, and they definitely slept during part of it. Um, but the afternoon temperatures in the high 90s to even 100, it was just brutal. And it's that safety becomes a real issue
Mhm.
there. Like, you have to take care of yourself.
So are you, I mean, when you're dealing with all the different temperature changes, day, night, like excuse me, um, are you carrying 3, 4 outfits with you? Like
I
what?
am,
Yeah.
yes. So the race I just did 3 weeks ago is a perfect example, because you have to prepare for both the hottest temperatures and the
Mhm.
coldest.
Right.
Because at nighttime above 12,000 feet, and it was raining and we had really strong weather, the temperatures are dipping down into the 30s. And in past years, it's even snowed. But then on day two, the last 25 miles of the race are below tree line in a canyon, and it can get really hot. It wasn't too terribly hot when we ran it, but I had to prepare. So yeah, you make use of drop bags and you have nighttime gear. So at the mile 50 aid station where I have my crew and my husband, they they put a beach towel around me for modesty, and I stripped down my shorts and I put on leggings for warmth. I put on an extra layer. I shoved my down puffy into my pack. I swapped out my sun hat for a wool beanie. So yeah, and then I had packed a drop bag at mile 75 that had a fresh pair of shorts and a t-shirt, so I could take off my nighttime hot clothes or warm clothes and be ready for running in warm weather on day two. I mean, you never know what to expect. And then I the kicker was we got caught in an extreme storm in the last 5 miles. And it
Mhm.
was the first time ever, because here in Colorado, I mean, it's crazy. It can be beautiful, hot, and sunny, blue sky until noon. And then the clouds gather and you get extreme high altitude weather, which is what happened. And it was such a deluge with so much electricity. I mean, there was thunder and lightning right overhead. that the race director actually made the difficult decision to put the race on hold. So he called his communications teams at the aid stations and had runners held at the aid stations. And we all had to stop for about 20, 25 minutes until the storm blew out, because that's how dangerous and extreme it was. So that was quite something. My pacer and I were running through ankle high water. I could barely see because the water was coming down so much. And I was so depleted. I was like exhausted. It was mile 99. And thunder, like rifle shots, was ringing out overhead, and there was flashes of lightning, and it was, and flash flooding. It was crazy. It was biblical. And this vehicle I was like, I gotta get to the finish. And this vehicle pulls up at my side, and the window goes down. It's the race director. He's like, get in. I was like, no, I gotta finish. He's like, no, get in. And he was rounding up all the runners in the last stretch to make sure we were safe. So that's the crazy stuff that happens in the mountains. That's what makes it an adventure. And so then we had to get out completely cold and stiff-legged.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, let's start running again. That's where you have to keep a sense of humor too. Like, it was memorable. That's what can you say? And we survived. So it was very exciting.
As I was reading about that, I was like, it plays out, at least in my head. You were there, so it maybe even more so. It plays out to me almost like an action movie, where like the race director's like going, like trying to save everybody. He's like the hero, and I don't know what kind of vehicle it was. I pictured like
it was a big
Jeep.
SUV.
I pictured like a Jeep or a Humvee or something.
But he was on
big.
his phone talking to aid station coordinators, and his medical directors were freaking out because all of the aid stations are made of pop-up tents with metal frames. And so runners were huddling under metal frames with lightning potentially hitting that. So it was a dicey situation, but I really respected how he handled it. He really, he put the safety of the runners and volunteers first. And we all now are running with the terrible incident in China in our minds, of the ultra that happened where all the runners got killed in extreme weather a couple months ago.
I had no idea about that.
Oh, it was international news. No,
I live in a bubble, so that's probably
no. There was an ultra marathon in China, and absolutely extreme, snowy, crazy weather. And you tend to think that it's the slower mid to the back of the packers who are going to suffer, but actually the elite level runners who were in the lead were several of them were the ones who died from hypothermia. And so ultra marathons, especially the extra long ones in the mountains, are taking extra precautions now. So that's why we had to carry in our pack for night. We had to carry pants. We had to carry certain types of jackets, emergency bivvies, everything to prevent that kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So it can turn dangerous. And it's so, people always ask, like, aren't you scared to be running in the trails like by yourself, as if I'm going to be attacked by either wild animals or bad people? And like, you have to understand, weather, the number one safety hazard is weather, extreme weather. And then secondly, is tripping and falling and either, hurting your ankle or hitting your head. So safety precautions for thermoregulation and knowing wilderness first aid are really, really important.
Which brings me perfectly. I wanted to ask you about the safety chapter.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's talking about running into wild animals, which in your case, your story with your husband,
wild dog,
right? Not necessarily. Well, we don't. I guess you don't really know whether they're wild animals or whether they're somebody's. Probably somebody's. But obviously, there's the safety considerations. You got to bring first aid, and I think you're talking about having like a puncture wound on your ankle that you had to treat yourself to be able to get back down off of a trail. So that it doesn't come without hazards. So the question is, I obviously you continue to do it, but given that there are hazards, why would it? So why would you continue if you get chased by dogs and you puncture your ankle and you potentially get struck by lightning in a thunderstorm?
I'm glad you brought up my book, because one thing I tried to do with my book is use storytelling at the
Hmm.
start of each chapter before the practical advice. And so, yeah, I basically in that chapter, I lay out how my husband and I made a series of
Right.
mistakes
It was like a
when
whole
we were running
checklist
in
of
Argentina.
like,
Like, yeah, I kind of unpacked all the stupid things we did when we were traveling in Argentina.
mhm,
And it could have ended really, really badly. And so it's important to understand like the things we did wrong. So one of the main things we did wrong is um, not having communication, and not people couldn't wouldn't have found us, or so for that reason, I always think about, what kind of breadcrumbs electronically or otherwise am I leaving so people know where to find me if they need to, and how. And so that can be, if I'm by myself, having a spot GPS tracker, or having my phone, or but phones are
mhm.
unreliable in the mountains. So yeah, being careful. So read that safety chapter for the checklist, and just prepare for the unexpected. But why do I do it? I really value. Um, I mean, I value so much the experience of running, and I don't want to always have to line up a friend or partner to be with me for safety's sake. So I
Mhm.
want the freedom to be able to run solo. And I just take all the precautions I can. And I want the freedom to be able to explore less populated areas. I mean, my daughter is now living in LA, and
Mhm.
she's really getting into hiking, which is wonderful. And so she's doing these big hikes on the weekend, and I'm telling her like, "Oh, you have to do this and this." And she's like, "Mom, you have no idea how crowded the trails are around here. I'm never going to be like, if something happened to her, there's so many people on those LA area trails, someone could
Mhm.
help her." But where I am really out there solo, and I love it, and I value it so much. Um, and I value running with friends too, but again, it's hard to line up having someone with you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the why it's not that I want to be alone or I want to be risky. That's not it at all. It's just I want to get my run in
Mhm.
on these beautiful trails, and so I do everything I can to stay safe with it.
Yeah. Um, so I don't want to run you too down on time and try to give you a little bit of
Oh,
safety
I'm doing
margin.
okay. I'm fine.
Um, it I don't know. I think about the I don't know, the experience of running, and like like how it plays a role in my life, and um doing it on your own, having friends, like the it's always nice to have somebody to go out with, but I would think, especially in your case, I mean, talking about the just that, I'll call it a short run, the like 20 some odd miles you did through Colorado Springs with the incline of it. Like, you're not always going to have a friend where you're like, let's go at this time and go run for the next 5 hours. Like, it's not always on everybody's agenda. Though maybe in Colorado, it's a little bit easier to find those kinds of friends than it is maybe for me here. Um, but do you make any kind of prerogative of saying, once a week or once a month, like I am going to go out with friends, or is it just like as long as I get my run in, like I'm good to go?
Oh no, I do social runs. I run every Wednesday morning. I join a local running group in
Mhm.
town, and you know, a lot of my runs are shorter too. It's like being an ultra runner does not mean you have to log long miles every day.
Mhm.
Um, no. I love running with other people and introducing other people to the sport, and but I also value my time alone too. I want to bring up something you touched on earlier about listening to podcasts or music
Mhm.
and safety considerations. So, part of the reason I like to run alone is I'm really into audiobooks. And so a lot of my time on the trail is spent listening to good books. And eh, I just want to give a tip about how to do that safely and what I've
Okay.
started to do. So when I'm out on the trail by myself, I am aware that I'm in mountain lion and bear habitat,
Mhm.
and I do want to, keep my ears open, and especially on single tracks where it's like single track trail that's pretty overgrown. And I feel
Hmm.
like, I could actually have a wild animal encounter here. So what I've started to do is, instead of having my AirPods in my ear, is I stick my phone in my front hydration pocket and play the sound of the book from the phone speaker out of my pocket.
Hmm.
So what that is I would not do that with music. Like, I think it's really obnoxious to other trail users to come across other people's music playing loudly. Like, that really interrupts the trail experience. But having like basically a conversation coming out of my pocket of this
Hmm.
podcast or audiobook, it's a way for me to listen to it with my ears open and aware of my surroundings. But it also serves as a warning to other trail users and big animals that there's someone coming down the trail. And so I
Hmm.
really, maybe it's a false sense of security, but that's one little bit of thing I've developed over the past several years that I feel like is a good way to warn large animals away. Like, I have seen bears run away from me because they don't want human encounters either. So that's just a little tip I have. I used to sing out loud on the trail when I felt
Hmm.
like I was in cougar habitat. I'd start singing or saying, "Hey bear, here I come, bear," just like alert big animals I'm coming down the
Yeah.
trail. But that's kind of silly. And so just having the audiobook playing in my pocket seems like a good work around that.
Yeah, as soon as you said you had it in your pocket, I was like, I think I know where you're going. And I
Yeah.
have a more mundane version of that. Is like, we have, not where I am right here because I'm now in the heart of the city, but we several years ago when I was doing more like runs in a park, has a trail, it was a paved trail, but then there's lots of wildlife. So it was not unusual to come across like a rattlesnake hanging out on the
Yeah.
pavement of the trail, sunning in the afternoon, or deer especially. And I never want to spook the deer because they often have babies with them, and I'm like, I don't need a deer to charge at me. So I would get in the habit of, like, if I saw one trying to whistle or something, like something
Yeah.
to be like I'm behind you. Please don't like
Yeah.
freak out and charge at me. Like, even though the deer's not a predator, it's not going to feel good
Yeah.
if it like runs into you and freaks out. So I definitely have employed kind of a similar strategy. And like you, I don't know if it works or not, but
I've had a lot of snake encounters, and I did almost once step on a rattler because I had AirPods in. I thought, like, what's this static? What's this
yeah,
noise? I thought something was wrong with my speakers. It's like, oh no, there's a snake right there
yeah,
rattling its tail and warning. And I was being stupid and what had my earbuds in.
yeah.
So yeah, live and learn.
Right. Um, so before we run out of time, so I'm asking everybody the same question this year. You listened to my episode with Jason, so you know the question. But I'm asking everybody this year: how do you stay motivated after failing to reach a goal?
How do I stay? Oh, actually, I didn't listen long enough to get that question. So,
Okay.
you're catching me off guard. How do I stay motivated after
How do you
failing
stay
to reach a
motivated after
goal?
failing to reach a goal? Yep.
Yeah, I think so. This has happened to me personally, and it happens to my clients. And I just take everything as a learning experience. And I mean, that's what resiliency is all about. It's about learning from failure, and then just really like make peace with that disappointment, but channel it into determination. Like, um, I've only had two DNFs in my life, and I've raced, I don't know, over 100 races,
Mhm.
many ultras. And I back in 2018, I failed. I dropped out at around mile 60 of one of the hardest hundreds here in Colorado called the Uray 100, and it haunted me. And it became a motivator. I mean, I'm like, I'm not going to go back to that one race, but I'm going to learn from it. And I really thought about like what led to that dropout, and that was a big factor in the two I did. I've done 200s this year, one in January and the one a few weeks ago. And I thought about that failure from 2018, and it totally motivated me and it helped me. Like, I didn't repeat that mistake. So failure is a good thing, as I tell my kids. Like, you know, It's a learning experience and a motivator.
It's like I asked that question because I think most of the people I speak with have plenty of experience failing, but I know that um, some people have trouble like getting started because they don't want to fail. And at least personally, I'm like, failing is not the end of the world. Like everybody fails, and the more you try, the more you're going to fail. It just comes along naturally with eh, success, and like they go hand in hand. So I love hearing like different
Well, yeah,
people's
failure. I
approaches
mean,
to it.
I would also ask if my clients, if a new client came to me saying like, I want to have a coach because I am so upset of this race. I was really aiming for a PR and I missed it by 15 minutes, and I just like I'm so upset about it. And I would say like, well, I would first question was that time goal really realistic? Like,
Hmm.
are you failing because you set an unrealistic goal? Like I believe goals should be aspirational but achievable.
Hmm.
And you should also have like goals leading up to it, or stepping stones along the way, process oriented goals. So, sometimes we fail because we've set the bar unrealistically high, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's important, like, and I'll just end by saying, like, as an aging athlete who has significantly slowed down for a few different factors. I mean, I peaked in my 30s and early 40s, and now I'm 52, and I have to make peace with being a slower mid packer now. And that means adjusting goals. It's not about failing. It's just like being realistic about where you are
Hmm.
now in life. And sometimes I feel self-imposed pressure and nervousness about racing, because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do as, especially if it's a race I've done before and I did well at. I'm like, there's no way I can do as well as I did 2 years ago. And just like, motivating yourself to just do the best you can on that given day under the
Hmm.
circumstances. Like, stop the comparisons with your earlier self or with the other competitors. Like, just do your best on that given day. um, but no, I think failure is itself a great motivator and a teacher.
Sarah, where can people get the book, see what you're up to, get in touch with you, all that kind of stuff?
Well, okay. Well, thanks for asking. So I want to give the book's subtitle just so people
Yes, please.
understand. So the book is called The Trail Runner's Companion, and the subtitle is A Step-by-Step Guide to Trail Running and Racing from 5Ks to Ultras. It's a mouthful.
You got it all.
But kind of explains what the book's about. And it has funny stories in it, or
Hmm.
they're funny. I didn't want it to be like a boring how-to book. Like, I wanted it to be
Right.
a good read. But you can get it on Amazon. It's at some independent bookstores, but mostly on Amazon. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram at Sarah Running. And I have a blog called The Runner's Trip, which it's a, blogging is now seems like such a retro thing, because everyone just puts several paragraphs under their Instagram posts and calls that a race report. But
Yeah.
I've been blogging for well over a decade. I started out as a travel blogger back in the days when I did significant travel, and I've had a running blog for over a decade. So I still update it occasionally, but that's called The Runner's Trip. And then if people are interested in my coaching, just go to saralavendersmith.com. So I have a website with my portfolio and my coaching info. That's about it.
Yeah. So if you're interested in picking up the book, it although it is a manual, it really it feels more like this conversation. Like you're sitting down with Sarah and she's telling you stories and then like relating that to what you should be doing. It's definitely not uh, you know, this is the dictionary style trail runner's
And you
companion.
won't, and you will not find training plan grids in there. I
Right.
am not a believer in cookie cutter, one size fits none, week by week training plans. What I
Yeah.
do is I give advice on how you should structure your week based on your training level and your individual circumstances. But I'm believe that anyone who downloads a plan from the internet or just gets a training grid you're setting yourself up for injury potentially, or you're either on any given day, you're that whatever this generic plan prescribes is going to be too easy or too hard for you.
Hmm.
So you really need to learn how to properly um, structure your own training weeks and your own training block. And so that's what I try to help people do.
Sarah, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Yeah, it's been great to talk. It's been really fun. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.